She stood on my front porch like she owned it, hair pinned up, clipboard in hand, barking orders at two guys carrying my couch out the door. "This isn't your house anymore," she snapped when I stepped out of the truck. "HOA rules. Abandoned property gets repurposed." I didn't say a word, just stared. My boots were still dusty from Afghanistan, and I hadn't even taken my duffel bag out of the truck yet. "You can't just walk in here," she added, blocking the path with her arm. "It's been 6 months. We assumed you weren't coming." Back assumed. My name was still on the deed. My rent was auto-paid through military payroll. I never missed a bill. But none of that mattered to her. Karen, the neighborhood president. She squinted at me like I was trespassing on someone else's land. "You'll need to speak with the board," she said, already turning back to the movers. "This home has been reassigned." "To who?" She didn't say. But the truck parked in. My driveway had a realtor magnet slapped on the side. That's when I saw my wedding photo in the trash pile by the curb. "You need to leave," she said again, this time with fake sweetness. "Before I call security." I looked her in the eyes and said flatly, "Call them." She actually smirked. I already did. 10 minutes later, a man in a rent-a-cop uniform came strolling up. He didn't ask for ID. He didn't ask what was going on. He just looked at Karen and said, "Is this the one?" She pointed at me like I was some criminal. "That's him. He's the squatter." Squatter. I'd taken a bullet 2 months ago in Kandahar. I still couldn't sleep through the night. And now I was being told I was a squatter, on my own land. I clenched my fists, then took a breath. "Sir, you need to vacate the premises," the fake cop said, his hand resting lazily on his belt, like he was ready to draw a weapon. I tilted my head slightly and said one quiet sentence. "You really don't want to do this." He didn't listen. They never do. The fake cop reached for my arm like he was about to escort me off my own property. But before he could touch me, a black SUV rolled up fast and stopped hard, tires crunching the edge of the lawn. Door swung open. First out was Ramirez, 6'4", tatted sleeves, and still wearing his dog tags like armor. Behind him came Simmons and Hall. We weren't in uniform, but we didn't have to be. Karen's face dropped the second she saw them. Who are these people?" she asked, stepping back a little. Ramirez didn't even look at her. He walked straight past, picked up my wedding photo from the trash, dusted it off, and handed it to me. "We got your call, Cap," he said. Didn't like the sound of it. Karen's voice turned sharp. "This is private property now. You can't bring strangers here and—" I cut her off. "It is private. Property. Mine." She turned red. "No, it's not. The HOA reviewed your status. You abandoned residency. We followed protocol." Simmons chuckled. "Lady, you kicked a deployed Army officer out of his own house. What protocol is that?" She tried to wave her clipboard. "According to subsection 4B, after 90 days of—" Hall snapped a picture of her with his phone and said, "You might want to stop talking now." That got her attention. "Are you recording me?" she snapped. "Yep," he said calmly. "See, this is what you call impersonation of authority, illegal eviction, destruction of private property, and probably fraud, all wrapped up in one HOA mess." Karen looked around, clearly trying to find someone, anyone who would back her up. The fake cop wasn't moving. He was suddenly real quiet. That's when the next car pulled up, but this one had real sirens. Real cops. Karen smiled. "Like she'd just won. I told you," she whispered. "You'd regret pushing me." But the moment the officers stepped out and saw us, everything shifted, because one of them, Officer Dean, looked right at me, straightened up, and said, "Captain Walker?" I nodded. He walked over, shook my hand, and said with full respect, in his voice, "Thank you for your service. We heard there was a trespasser and guess that's not you." Karen blinked. "Wait, what? He's the trespasser. He doesn't live here anymore." Dean raised a brow. "Ma'am, he owns the house." "I pulled the title before we came," she stammered. "But the HOAs don't override federal law," he said sharply, "or military protections." Then he turned to the fake cop. Where's your badge number? The man froze. Karen's voice cracked. He's with Neighborhood Patrol. We hired him to. Dean cut her off. That's private security impersonating. Law enforcement. She tried to argue, but this time no one was listening. Ramirez leaned over and muttered in my ear, "Told you we'd come in time." I nodded, watching Karen's world start to unravel, but I wasn't done yet, not even close. Karen kept talking, her voice getting faster, higher, like if she said enough words, she could make the truth disappear. I have documents. The board signed off. We followed every... Where are the documents? I asked. She paused. Just for a second, but it was enough. Ramirez smiled. Yeah, that's what we thought. Karen looked over at the realtor truck in my driveway. The driver, some 20-something kid with a Bluetooth in his ear, had been watching the whole thing from behind the windshield. "Hey," she yelled at him, "bring the paperwork." He didn't move, just shook his head slowly and mouthed the word, "Nope." That's when Simmons stepped up. He'd been quiet this whole time, but now he walked straight to the porch and said, "Cap, you want us to check inside? Make sure nothing else got repurposed?" I nodded once. Karen gasped, "You can't go in there. That's against HOA protocol." Dean, the real officer, looked at her like she'd lost her mind. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "you just emptied a soldier's house while he was deployed. That's called burglary. You're in no position to bark rules." She opened her mouth to argue, but just then Hall came out of the house with a stack of papers. He dropped them onto the porch step. "Found your documents," he said. "All unsigned." Karen lunged toward them, maybe to hide them, maybe to snatch something back, but Dean stepped between her and the pile. "That's enough," he said firmly. "Put your hands where I can see them." Her eyes went wide. "You're arresting me for protecting the neighborhood." "For lying," he replied. "For trespassing, for impersonation, for interfering with federal housing rights." She stumbled backward, tripped over her own clipboard and landed on the grass. Nobody helped her up. The fake cop was already in handcuffs. He didn't say a word. The movers had quietly packed up and left 5 minutes ago, pretending they had nothing to do with any of this. I stood there in the middle of it all, feeling the weight of it settle in. 6 months of deployment. 6 months, wondering if my house was still standing. And now this. Karen still didn't get it. As the real officers read her rights, she shouted back at me, "You think this is over? I run this neighborhood. You're not welcome here." I looked at her with calm eyes. "My name's still on the gate," I said. "And I didn't fight overseas just to be pushed off my own porch by someone with a clipboard and a power trip." Ramirez clapped me on the back. Hall smiled. But Simmons? He was still holding something from inside. A small file folder with HOA, letterhead, and something about the way he looked at it. He said, "Cap, you need to see this." Simmons handed me the folder like it was radioactive. His face had gone serious, and he never looked serious unless things were about to get real. Opened it slowly. Inside were copies of emails, printed out, some with parts blacked out. One caught my eye immediately. Subject 331 Maple Drive, property transfer request, from Karen.HOA, director@gmail.com, to board admin Maple Ridge HOA.org. Date, 3 weeks after I deployed. The owner is on military leave, but there's been no response for weeks. I suggest we begin the silent claim process. If we list the property as abandoned, we can expedite the reassignment. I have a buyer lined up. Buyer? My blood ran cold. I flipped to the next page. A scanned check. 10 grand. Made out to Karen Lewis, memo line. Deposit future property at 331 Maple. Ramirez whistled low. She was trying to sell it off. Simmons nodded. To some cash buyer off the books. Probably thought no one would know.